What if we told you the power to power the entire globe is already here on Earth, has been here for millions of years? Hello, and welcome to Believe in Aliens, a podcast that celebrates extraordinary journeys of people who leave everything they know behind to build towards a bigger purpose. The show offers an intimate look into the resilience, ambition, and unique perspectives of those who defy the odds to create something transformative. Today, we're excited to welcome Arpit Dwivedi, the founder of Cache Energy. Recognizing the limitations of current energy storage solutions, Arpit founded Cache Energy to develop innovative long-duration energy storage technology aimed at enabling a future of clean energy. Arpit's vision is to create a power source that has some of the advantages as traditional fuels, but without the harmful carbon emissions, showcasing the kind of unconventional thinking that resonates with the spirit of believing in aliens. In this episode, we'll explore Arpit's drive to address the limitations of current energy storage solutions, Cache's focus on developing innovative long-duration energy storage technology, and mission to provide a low-cost and operationally simple solution. And finally, Arpit's incredible journey from India to the United States to pursue his passion for this project. Get ready to have your perspectives challenged and to believe in the power of those who see the world a little differently. Arpit, welcome to the podcast. And where are you today?
I am presently in Champaign, Illinois, which doesn't happen as much these days, but I have to be back in office.
So can you elaborate on the unique approach Cache Energy is taking with long-duration energy storage? What makes it different from traditional long-duration energy storages that may exist in this world today?
Yeah, I think one differentiation we have is we are very much inspired by fossil fuels. I think fossil fuels have some things they do amazingly well. They are low cost. They can be easily stored. They can be transported from one place to another safely. And we thought that this is amazing. We're like, how can we take the good that fossil fuel offer and do away with some of the repercussions they have? That was the first principle thought process that we had before cache even was a thing. And we started thinking, what are fossil fuels? Fossil fuels are like chemicals that we found buried inside the earth. And when you burn them, it produces heat. And what is burning? It's nothing, just a chemical reaction. So we were like, can we find some other chemical reaction which would also produce heat while not producing carbon dioxide? And we looked into multiple different chemical reactions. But our decision criteria was it has to be very low cost. It has to be abundant. We are very simple because we are borrowing a lot of features from how we have been operating fossil plants. So we can leverage a lot of existing infrastructure, which makes our systems simpler.
So let's talk a little bit more about that. How did you identify this? What went into the journey to identify the potential of limestone?
Yeah, so I think it was more backwards. It was like not starting with limestone and figuring out what it can do, but more of what are the limitations of conventional batteries? Why is this problem not already solved? Why do I need to start a company to solve this problem? And we were like, lithium-ion batteries are great for some aspects, but they don't scale, meaning they're not able to store a large quantity of energy cost effectively. And one would argue that let's just buy more batteries and store more energy. That's where the cost comes in, right? And when you start looking into something which is low cost, can produce heat at a much faster rate, because you don't want something that is very slow to charge and discharge, because that shows up in the total system cost. So something that is low cost can produce heat quickly, is abundant. And if you put those three constraints on yourself and look what are the material that fit those three constraints, you don't have a lot of options. And we also chose limestone or lime because a lot of science was to risk. It was not like we had to go and win a Nobel Prize before we could start a company. So leveraging a lot of existing science that existed around reaction of lime and water producing heat helped us propel faster than the folks who were starting with more fundamental concepts.
It's interesting. I think some of the way you describe the approach here was probably how the oil and gas industry used to talk in the 1950s and 60s. Abundant, low cost, accessible. What has shifted? Why is that different today? And what is a broader perspective that has shifted around fossil fuels beyond just the greenhouse gas emissions?
I think what has happened in a decade or so is solar and wind have fallen down in cost significantly. What that means is it's in many places much cheaper to produce electricity from solar and wind than it is to produce from fossil fuel. And once that shift happens, the lowest cost energy source should win and is winning in places where it is possible. But yeah, that's the opportunity that we are looking into. And just to add on to that point, Manan, is uh, in order for solar and wind to be low cost throughout the year and available throughout the year, you need to store them because solar and wind was always present. So if solar and wind is cheap for 50% of the time in the year, that's not enough because you need energy every day, every hour, every second. So how do you make it available? And that's where the value proposition of energy storage and specifically long duration storage comes in. And that's why I keep focusing on like low cost because yeah, solar and wind could be cheap, but if your storage is not cheap, then kind of defeating the whole purpose.
A lot of this talk about energy storage, right? And you and I were texting a couple of weeks ago, and you were diving deep into some of the annual filings of a company that's widely known by many of us. And the company's Tesla, where they also do a consumer version of certainly a battery storage. Talk a little bit about the differences just for the uninitiated when they hear long duration energy storage versus a battery on their wall. What are the differences in technology or really maybe in application that we should know when you think about cash?
Yeah, I think the major difference is the duration for which for example, a conventional lithium-ion battery versus us are able to dispatch energy. So if you need energy for 15 hours straight or 20 hours straight, and you buy a battery, a lithium-ion at its highest capacity of discharge can give you for, say, 8 hours. So what that means is like you need to buy 3 of 8-hour batteries to give you 24 hours of constant energy, right? And the cost per unit battery for all those 3 batteries remain the same. In our case, as you're adding more duration, so it's for the 8 hours to 16 hours to 24 hours, because you need 24 hours of continuous energy supply, the cost keeps going down. So overall capex is much lower in our case versus a conventional battery. And that is very important if energy storage has to make sense, especially for longer duration. So batteries work great for 4-6 hours, and that's why you see it being deployed at home, even at grid. But as we get to a point where we need longer duration of storage, the cost is not justified. So if I have to simplify all of what I said, I would just say it's the cost difference, it's a capex difference. Simple. The other difference is we produce heat as a first product. And that heat is high enough of a temperature that you can produce electricity after that. And that's why my analogy with fossil fuel, because you burn coal, it produces heat. You heat the water, steam is produced, and you produce electricity, which is different from what lithium-ion battery in your phone would do, for example.
That's really helpful. I think for a lot of people, we have such a basic understanding of power, which I think is really a function of what has happened globally and the power accessibility that we've had. But I do think there's a lot of room for innovation. And I am curious, what are the factors of today that make this possible versus what you would have imagined 20, 30 years ago? Like, why are you, Arpit, doing this today? And why has no one else figured it out?
So as I said, like solar and wind have only recently become much cheaper that it actually makes sense to consider them in our energy mix, right? Um, and so that is the number one reason. And the
What
second
made
is,
them cheaper?
I think it's a lot of learning curve, a lot of technological innovation and mass production. The efficiency of these solar panels have also gone up over a period of time. And we have learned to better integrate these at larger scale. So yeah, so a lot of technological breakthrough, economies of scale coming together over last 10 years or so to make it much cheaper than they used to be and making it competitive with fossil fuels.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on the key innovations that you are driving around the cost effectiveness and the simplicity? I have seen some photos of installations and it is remarkable how simple this is. But can you elaborate for the listener what went into that clarity to get the simplicity?
Yeah, I think me and perhaps my team is maybe inherently wired to think simply. We think what is the bare minimum thing that we can put together that will function well, will be reliable and resilient. And so it's more of a bottom-up approach rather than make something work no matter what, add as many parts as possible in a goal to make something work and then simplify. We kind of take the opposite approach of what are the minimum components that you need to put together for it to be work, and then add more components as you make it more reliable and more resilient. So that I think there's a culture around simple thinking and then minimum parts that drives us and the team here. And I think very initially, very early days, we decided that even the first of a kind units that we will build will be very cost conscious. Most people are not very cost conscious on their first of a kind units. And we decided like we don't have a lot of time to build $1 million unit and get it to $100,000 in 10 years. We want the first unit to be a few $100,000. So I can get into a lot of technicalities of like how we did this, but that's like a more broader strategy or thought process that we try to instill in people we hire in the team. Because simplicity is the most important thing and low cost is the most important thing if we ever have to be relevant in this market.
Could you elaborate? You've mentioned this a few times on the economic model for Cache Energy. To be a low cost solution, it's not just a small difference that you're looking for. You're looking for a step function difference in the cost structures of Cache. Talk to us a little bit about that. And also help us appreciate what the initial costs benefits would be and the ongoing and maybe operational costs of maintaining that.
Yeah, good question. And I can go on for a couple hours. But I think it is very important for any new technology to be an order of magnitude lower than the existing ones, because there's a time period over which you develop a technology. It takes like few years to get from a prototype to a pilot to a TRL9 product. And in the meantime, the technologies which are existing have been maturing over a period of time and getting the economies of scale advantage, having a learning curve advantages. And if you're not like significantly, like an auto should better, by the time you're ready, the existing technology is already lower in price. And that has happened with so many other startups trying to compete with lithium-ion batteries, for example. So that was very important to us. But that's more of a business reason. But I think more inherent reason, according to me and my team, is it should be something that is readily adoptable, not in just one part of the world, but like everywhere. And to do that, you have to make it cheap to buy or install, but also operationally simple. To some extent, the OPEX cost, which is operation cost, which is basically how much money you pay every year to keep the system running in good condition, is a function of the CapEx. So if you can reduce the CapEx, OPEX naturally goes down a little bit. But then we spend a lot of time thinking about reliability. Is this component going to break in 2 years or 10 years? How can we make it not break in 2 years? So once you start focusing on those things, I guess the OPEX also goes down. And that's why I say simplicity. Anything that is simple is reliable. Anything that is simple is resilient. And all that shows in the OPEX.
I get chilled when you say that because it is a powerful, simple statement, right? And it gives me vibes and energy of how Elon thought about Tesla cars, ultimately. If as a owner myself of a Model Y, my operational expenses of that car is close to zero. It's just the charging. There's no maintenance. There's no, other than tires and windshield wiper fluid, I'm not doing a lot of work on it.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to parallel because they're different industries and different kind of models. But I do think at the end of the day, we're all consumers, and consumers love when they get to have what they have without having to maintain it.
Yeah. Can I add one more thing? Is any new technology, whenever technology innovation happens, there is a beachhead, right? There's a early adopters, and then it percolates, or like I call it trickle down to other parts of the society and other people. And the time for the technology to trickle down and be adopted widely varies. And that time is inherently related to the nature of the technology. So if you don't give a lot of thought process in your first of a kind, second of a kind, in choosing what raw material you're putting in your technology, that time becomes very long. Like it will be 50 years until like someone in a rural part of a developing country would have access to those technologies. But I think what will be good about us, since we have put so much thought in the simplicity and the cost effectiveness of it, that trickle down time will be very fast, or it will be very short. it could be adopted widely at a faster scale than most of the technologies.
So let's talk about some of the incumbents. I do want for the listeners to appreciate this philosophy of frugality and speed and how much it takes for you to build a long duration energy storage system versus perhaps some of the other significantly more funded competitors. What is different here and why? And what's your hypothesis on why cash will win over anyone else?
I think as a rule of thumb, we are about 3x to 5x cheaper than the next cheapest alternative. And this is not coming just from me, but this is like independent.
Are you willing to name who they are?
The incumbents?
Yeah. When you say 3 to 5x?
3 to 5x cheaper than any technology which is heating bricks or heating sand. There are a lot of companies trying to heat something up to store heat. Compared to those kind of technologies, and there are a bunch of companies doing that, will be about 3 to 5x cheaper in terms of capex. And I can tell you the reason. It gets a little technical. So when we are storing energy, nothing is hot, right? So when other folks are storing energy, they're heating something, which means heat is being stored by virtue of some material, brick, sand, concrete, being hot. Now, you need an insulation around it. You need to put in a container, and that container cannot be cheap plastic or cheap steel. It has to be a very specific alloy because things are hot. And no insulation is perfect. So the moment you stop charging, you start losing energy. And also the container that is surrounding these bricks is expensive. Now, when we are storing energy, we are storing in chemical bonds, just like fossil fuels do, just like coal do. Coal is storing heat, but coal is not hot. You can put coal in a plastic container and it'll be fine. So it's kind of similar concept. We are storing energy in a low-cost solid that is not hot. So we don't need insulation. We don't need fancy containment. All that shows up in the cost of the system. So that is like one of the reasons how we are able to cut the cost down. And there are some other reasons, but that's the main one.
For those that may know the space, I think we can figure out who he's referring to if we want. But I think the more important part is the step function change, the order of magnitude shift that cash is trying to bring into the world. And so let's talk about that vision that you've had, right? Part of your story, which we'll dive into more at the end as well, is coming to the United States to achieve a very large vision. As you sit here today, what are the biggest hurdles you will face to achieving your vision?
I think vision is very simple. It is making energy accessible and affordable. That's it. No fancy sugar-coated word. Making sure that everybody, irrespective of where they are, have access to cheap and clean energy. And we are in an exciting time where solar and wind is very low cost and is falling down in price. And sun and wind doesn't differentiate who you are and where you're from. It's free for everybody. And if we learn to store it cheaply, we can make sure that energy is something which is accessible and affordable to everybody, independent of who your dad is. You know what I'm saying? Where you were born, basically.
Yeah.
That's simple goal.
Simple, not simple to do. And so what are the major hurdles that you are excited to overcome and to prove to realize this vision? And maybe you already are. Maybe talk a little bit about where you're seeing that early adoption, who's using it, why they're using it. So the listener can appreciate that this is not just a theoretical science experiment in the labs of UIUC anymore. This has been focused on commercialization from the very beginning.
Yeah. And so some of the early adopters are folks who are either have very high heating prices, and that could be they're using a source of fuel which is inherently expensive for heating, or number two, they have a lot of fluctuations in their heating prices. For example, natural gas can go through fluctuations in prices. So that's one kind of a bucket of people, of customers, early adopters. And the second bucket is folks who are looking into redundancy, resiliency in the energy mix. So they're using our units as a source that is fully charged, ready to dispatch energy, even in the harshest weather condition. It could be the coldest winter you can think of, and we can provide heat. So those are the features of the early adopters that we are seeing, and we are already in the process of deploying. So it is long gone a science experiment. We are all about deploying as fast as possible.
You talked about the harshest winter. There's a couple of places that you've done this. One, maybe outside your lab in a field that you can talk a little about what you're doing with a off the shelf cooler, I believe. And then there was there's some announcement in one of our 50 states, that might be the coldest state of our union. Can you talk about what's going on in those two harshest environments and what you're trying to prove?
Correct. And so we wanted to prove that once you charge our energy storage material, it would not lose energy over time. And it doesn't matter if it rains, if it is hot, if it is humid, if it is the harshest cold. So the first test we did for that is we charged about 1 ton of material, found the cheapest plastic deck pots from Walmart, and we put this material in deck pots and we dumped it outside. And this is Midwest, Champaign-Urbana near Chicago. It has been sitting outside for 2 years now, roughly. So it has seen plus 90 Fahrenheit, which was the hottest day we had, and negative 10 Fahrenheit. It has seen rain, it has seen snow. It has been knocked by wind sometimes. What we have proven is as long as you keep it physically contained, and it could be the simplest containers you can think of, it will not lose energy over time. So that was one test we did. And then one of the questions we got from our customers was like, what happens if it is colder than minus 10 Fahrenheit at your test is? So we were running our pilot in Alaska. We charged, a couple barrels of these pellets during summer. And then we shipped these charged barrels. And these barrels are simple oil barrels, by the way. And we shipped it to Prudhoe Bay, which is one of the coldest places in Alaska. It goes to up to minus 40 Fahrenheit, or minus 40 degrees Celsius in the winter, and has been sitting there for about 4 or 5 months now. For the entire winter it was there. And what we are doing is we're taking some samples out every couple of weeks and checking if how much energy still retains. And we have proven in either of the cases that it doesn't lose energy. And some people are surprised, but I said, if there was a coal sitting in a box, you wouldn't think that coal is losing its energy. Coal doesn't lose energy unless you burn coal. And that's a similar concept.
It's remarkable. I think the underlying narrative that I'm hearing is we're using off the shelf stuff that anyone can get.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. You keep on, like throughout this entire conversation, you keep on going back to the simplicity in everything you've done. You try to ensure that if it already exists, how can I use it?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of work that has happened, and there's a lot to learn from and leverage rather than inventing things from scratch every time. And I think there's a place for R&D, and we do a lot of R&D, forward-looking R&D, but there's a lot of things we can leverage on, and we should leverage on to move fast and deploy these things.
Hey, is this the cornerstone of how you make, for simplicity, LDS or LDES energy a truly accessible and affordable source for communities? Is this the key points here and how it can really fit local needs, local municipalities, get down to the human, you and I kind of level? Is this the key to it?
Yeah, I think having already proven components that people are used to using or industries are used to using, it has been proven for decades, and we are not going out and proving that helps a lot. Like when people have seen these components somewhere else and they see, oh, I know this component, I know this component, I know this component. The system seems more familiar. It's much easier to adopt that way. And the other implication is cost is lower. The supply chain risk doesn't exist around those components.
If I were to open up a box that you shipped to me, I was a customer, how many pages would the instruction manual be to assemble it?
I would say 2.
2.
And
Even IKEA can't pull that off.
The way we ship it, just to give you an example, when we were doing, and we have moved our unit throughout the country. We have not been very public about where, but we count the time from which the shipping container arrives to the time it is completely operational, fully. And we also count the number of people who are needed. It takes about 1 or 1.5 or sometimes 2 people working for 8 hours to get this completely out of the shipping container. And I'm talking about like massive equipment. It's not like a small tabletop energy equipment battery. It's a massive equipment, and everything is integrated within a few hours of 1 to 2 people working.
Wow. Talk about low cost, operationally simple, and then also recognizing by having a low capex, you have immediately from the moment of receiving the product, or the system, you have low OpEx. And the moment you get it,
And it might sound like too many features, but to be honest, the simplicity is the key. If something is simple, it doesn't have too many parts. So not if there are many parts, not many things will break down, which means you have a lower OpEx. And if there are not many parts, there are less things to integrate and assemble. You can say it in different ways, but ultimately it's because it's simple.
I love it. This is the simplicity that I oftentimes get to appreciate from immigrant founders who have to navigate new sectors. And in your case, what are some of the unwritten rules or conventional wisdom within the energy industry in the US that you have found to be the most counterproductive or limiting to innovation, particularly for your solutions, like for long duration energy storage solutions? What have you found that was really fun to challenge?
I think the one thing that I found specifically, which was a conventional wisdom and did not apply to us, was how fast can you take a concept, like an idea, not just how fast, how much money, like how much money is needed and how much time is needed to take a new technology and bring it to commercialization. Like the conventional wisdom and all the examples that we used to see is several years and millions of dollars. And none of those numbers are our numbers. And I think that is one thing that I have seen to be very different in our case and compared to our competition as well. We have taken much lower time and much, much less money to get to a place where a new energy technology is commercialized compared to other folks. And that is one thing we hear from our investors. Of us, them being surprised of what is possible to spend so less amount of money and get there fast.
So let's imagine that cache energy is ubiquitous across the world. How do you envision the role in the business models of traditional large-scale energy utilities evolving from that point?
Yeah, I think just to be clear, like we are an energy storage company right now. That's how people recognize us, but we are building an energy company. So long duration energy storage is one of the things that we are working on right now and it's taking our full focus. But we want to build an energy company long term, which means that this would not be the only thing that we are working and commercializing. I think there is some hypothesis I hear from some of my friends is that long term, the future of energy is more decentralized, where there's no need of large electric utilities because everybody is to some extent self-sufficient. And so there are also solar panels and the smaller wind farms. I don't fully believe that's going to happen. It's almost like transportation. Like when car was invented and people started having cars, the train systems and the rail systems still remain. So I think there is still a place for kind of centralized, large-scale energy producers. But I think their share will be slightly lower and will be fragmented into decentralized energy generation coupled with storage. I think that will be a difference compared to how things have been in past. And I hope, that these solutions for any new solution around storage, for example, are low cost enough and are easy to adopt enough that energy will be more accessible than it has been in past. Energy will be more affordable than it has been in past, which is kind of our mission.
So let's go back to cache a little bit and the innovation that you're driving. And I'd love to focus a bit more on how you took your uncommon knowledge and the unique perspective to take your idea to the next level, right? By putting it into action. I think you've talked about this in written format in the past, but I'd love to ask in this conversation, what are the most significant operational and engineering challenges you're currently facing in bridging the gap between continuous production and your pilot projects and future commercial scale? Get in the weeds with us.
Yeah, I think resources actually are always constrained. You have fixed number of people, fixed amount of money, and you have to keep deploying these units in field while you have to keep scaling from the size that you have right now or what we have right now. So one of that always remains a bigger challenge, like the resource constraint, because we don't just want to like scale the team to 200 people right away.
How many people do you have right now?
About 10, 12 people.
That's it.
That's it.
Okay. And you've done all this with that?
Actually, less than that because we recently added other people. And the team, I think slightly overworked team performs better than too many people. I think you spend too much time in communication and coordination when you think too many big balls. So I like towards understaffing than overstaffing. But yeah, so I think that has been the biggest challenge of we do want to keep deploying as fast as possible, but we also want to scale to like 50 megawatt or 100 megawatt. And how do you manage your limited resources doing both? And one of the things that we have focused on is since our systems are so modular, they can be moved around easily. So instead of building like 50 units for 50 customers, we can build lesser number of units and we can move them around for different customers. So that reduces the number of units we have built, which saves us time and money and frees up time for scaling activities, while also enabling us to go and deploy more.
You're setting up a great question, which is what innovative solutions or partnerships beyond the collaboration with Halliburton, which I think is public, are you exploring to overcome these limitations and ensure consistent quality at higher volumes? Who are your key allies?
Of course, Halliburton has been a great partner, but beyond that, we have a network of vendors that we have had relationship with for now 2.5 years, who have helped us in like scaling and getting beyond a prototype to a more finished design that is ready to like replicate and produce, mass produced. In terms of the innovative business model, the leasing I think has worked out pretty well for us, where instead of customer having to come and be like, I need to spend several $1 million to even get my hands on these units and see if it's a good fit for me. We are like, no, you don't need to spend so much money. We have a unit, you could lease it from us and you could lease it on a weekly, monthly, yearly basis. And you can try it out at a fraction of cost than having to buy it. And of course you have an option to buy it later if everything works out. So that has opened up more doors. It has made it less risky for folks to try these in a new energy storage solution without burning their pocket.
You won a few awards. You want to talk a little bit about what those are?
We were the winners of Department of Energy Innovation Prize in, I think it was 2023. And then we were at the White House in 2024 for a DOE big pitch competition among 10 companies selected. And we were the winners there. So those are the two kind of recognition from Department of Energy that we are proud of.
I love your humility and how you also speak to this. I want to switch gears now towards your journey and what other entrepreneurs may be able to learn from you. I've had the benefit of hearing the story, but I would love to have you tell a little bit more about your personal motivation. You made a decision to leave India, but that decision was first rooted in something that was already in you around energy and long duration energy storage. Can you talk to us a little bit about that and spend a few moments talking about the pivotal moments perhaps in your life that this self-belief and understanding that you could solve a problem that maybe other people were overlooking. Talk to us about that journey.
Yeah, I think there was no one pivotal moment. It was always building. It's something that was building and more like inherent. So growing up, I was exposed to communities where energy is not accessible. Like I saw folks not having electricity at all to having 2 hours, then 4 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours, 20 hours. I still not 24 hours for many communities. And I saw how the life changed. And I think words cannot justify the difference that makes in people's life. The things that we take for granted is not readily available. And I still mean people's life is so much different just because there is electricity at 7 p.m. and the sun sets, so people feel safe going out. They can pump water instead of going miles to a well, which is one less job, 100 people. And I can keep going on these like small impacts. And I saw that, and I said, if there is something that touches everybody, rich, poor, irrespective of where you are, is energy. And it also lies at the core of a lot of socioeconomic problems that the world faces. And to be honest, what we care about is low cost and accessible energy. Like we are agnostic of the source, where it comes from. As long as it is low cost and as long as it is sustainable, we are all for it. Anyways, I digress, but that was my bringing, and I saw that, and I thought there's no better of a problem to work on than energy. And I was running a company before. Back in India, we were making new kind of steels and alloys for Fortune 500 companies. I tried to pivot that company towards energy. The timing was not right, so I decided to just move and come here because it seemed like a place where things are possible. And
here's America.
Here's America, correct? And PhD was an excuse.
Wait, say that again? The PhD was an excuse? Say more.
PhD was an excuse. Yeah, PhD was a great excuse because it just gave me time to like really think hard on the problem and work backwards on what is the best thing to work on. If the goal is to make energy accessible and affordable, what is the missing piece? So it gave me some time to think through the problem. And
5 years in a university as an excuse. I just want to comment on that is the extraordinary commitment of someone who's obsessed with solving a problem.
Yeah, and it was never like, 5 years ended and then we start. It was like a smooth transition because I knew coming here that I want to do this. And over all those 5 years, it was brewing. It was like getting more and more solidified slowly. And then when it was solidified enough, I broke up with my PhD advisor.
I'm just hearing so many components of self-belief and self-motivation. How do you hone that? How do you practice that discipline? I know some of the things that you do very regularly, but can you share a little bit more about what activities, what are you reading to keep your mind sharp and always growing and learning?
I think it's, again, backwards. I think it is not that someone needs to read something so that they can pursue what they want. Someone has a clear conviction on what they want to pursue. That pursuit makes you read the right things, get into the right habits, talk to the right people in order to be worthy enough to pursue that goal. What is clear in my mind is a vision, and it is very strong and it cannot be moved. And once you have this clarity, once you're in love with a vision, that itself governs your behavior, habits, activities, what books you read, who you talk to. I do read a lot of biographies because there's so much to learn from people who have already done this, especially the history of technology. I love going back and seeing the initial days when a new technology was introduced and how did people react to it, what was the timeline over which something was adopted, why something was adopted faster than others. And it's just because we are the face where we are kind of trying to commercialize. The summary being that I feel if you really love something and want something, you teach yourself. You get into the habit. At one point, I was great at our energy storage material. Then I became great at, I shouldn't say great, good at energy storage material. Then I became good at our reactor of the systems. And then I became better at talking to customers. So it's a journey. And whatever is needed at the time, you grow into just because you want to do it so badly.
It's remarkable what you're talking about. And I think it's something that we've noted in so many of the most ambitious immigrant founders it oftentimes is that clarity. When did you find that clarity? Do you remember it? Was there a moment?
Again, I think there was no kind of eureka moment. It was always building. And I think, and that's the right way to do it. I think like decisions which are made on like as a step function or like a very rapid transitions are not bound to last long. Something that you have thought through over a period of time and you have eliminated other possibilities are bound to stick with you. And another true passion that you would carry. So what I did was like I explored a lot of things when I was an undergrad. I tried to explore and work on anything I could, of course, like still in engineering, broadly speaking. And I figured out what I don't like. And sometimes to figure out what you like is figuring out what you don't like. It's like elimination. So I eliminated a lot of things by trying. And then since I had tried everything, like most things that I thought was interesting, then when I found energy, I was like very satisfied. I was never like, let's chase the next shiny thing because that sounds cool. I was like, I have tried things. I have taken time to think through it. And this is what I want to do for my entire life.
Sounds a little bit like energy alignment was both in the world and in you. I do want to actually ask the one question going back to how you think. Are you somebody that experiences any moments of self doubt?
Maybe very early on in my life. But if you go through like hardships and you have seen examples in past where many people were doubting something or you had doubts about something and then you were still able to overcome it through grit and perseverance, just because you had taken time to decide that this is what you really want. And if you really want something, there'll always be some obstacles within yourself and outside. But if you have had enough examples in past of you overcoming that, at this stage in my life, it seems like it's again one of those things where people would doubt it. We'll go through it. We'll figure it out.
Are you willing to share some of those most poignant hardships that you overcame that you believed, that you started believing?
Maybe just like a few years ago when I was starting this company, I was still in my PhD, and there was a lot of skepticism around it's really like a low cost solid that can store energy forever. It's just like coal. I was a solo founder, and is it even possible? Can you raise enough money? Can you get people around this vision to build something? So there was a lot of doubts then, and I had the clarity that there is no other way. There's no plan B. I think the best
Mm.
the best driver of perseverance is not having a plan B. I did not have any plan B. So it was not like, oh, let me try this for 5 years or 4 years and it doesn't work out. I'll go and find a job somewhere. I was like, no, I do not want to. This is the only thing I want to do. So not having plan B got me through it.
Are there any moments of your childhood that you can recount of challenges or hardships that, again, so much of our lives are developed before we even turn 18 years old? And so,
Yeah.
anything come to mind?
Like a lot of these incidents in life, when you face hardship and you still go through it over a period of time, you learn that's just the way it works. Just because it is hard doesn't mean that it would not work. In fact, it's hard. That means it's worth pursuing.
I really appreciate that. So, switching gears a little bit, how do you think about how you could balance your roots in India while contributing to what really was your American dream? That's why you came to the United States through innovation. Do you think about, you mentioned earlier, a lot of communities didn't have energy. How do you balance those thoughts? Or do you just keep on moving forward right now?
The way I think about this is I think it's a global issue. It's not like an India issue or a non-India issue. It's a global issue. America gives the best platform to build from, but it's ultimately a
Hmm.
global issue. So it transcends where you're from, who you are, and that's what I love about energy. So this whole idea of where I'm from, where I'm going, fades if you think about what you're working on as a global issue. It touches everybody irrespective of who they are, what they look like, what language they speak.
The whole idea of this conversation and believe in aliens is to celebrate people who leave their comfort zones and build something new in a place that you don't really know anyone. Unfamiliar territory, and the only way to navigate it is through curiosity and resilience. And so coming to the United States, Urbana-Champaign must have been quite a shift. Maybe you didn't look at it that way, but it was. How did that experience of being an outsider shape the way you approached building cash? And what were the ways that having that fresh perspective actually became a unique advantage when you're tackling challenges in this country?
I think there's some inherent resilience of being comfortable in uncomfortable, which you get through a lot when you're running a company. Being able to go in an unfamiliar situation, learn, adapt, and get through that. So brain gets a little bit wired. And I think not just me, for like most people who have gone through this, to just be comfortable with uncomfortable. It's okay to be uncomfortable. I think that is a theme once you have done this. And it's very powerful and can be used a lot when you're running a company. So just that like acknowledgement that it is okay to be uncomfortable and you'll get through it. And if something's uncomfortable, that means you're growing or building something that is important. Just that remembrance or like acknowledgement. That's very helpful.
Arpit, thank you so much for this. I think the conversation has been rooted in really a lot of critical themes that entrepreneurs or investors can take from this. And that is there's a real benefit of frugality and speed. There's a resounding benefit of being simple and keeping it simple, right? And then I also want to just honor where you ended this conversation, which is about the growing comfort with discomfort to push the boundaries of what's possible. Thank you so much for this. And I want to reiterate some of the key messages and encourage people who might listen to this to embrace your different perspectives. And Arpit has done the last maybe decade or so, continue to challenge conventional thinking. Again, I hope you can draw inspiration from Arpit. And so thank you, Arpit, for joining.
Thank you very much, Manan.
All right. Thanks everyone for listening. If you enjoy the pod, please take a moment to share it with a friend. You can find us on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and everywhere else podcasts can be found. This show is produced by Anand Shah. I'm your host, Manan Mehta, and this has been an effing funny production. Do you believe in aliens? I know I do. Thank you.